Hot off the heels of classic Sonic's return to form in Sonic Mania, Sonic Forces is the latest game in the series' core 3D line. It attempts to introduce a few new ideas, while simultaneously holding on to long-term bad habits that here have culminated into an albatross on the neck of the entire series. While some fans may appreciate the renewed focus on plot, as well as the inclusion of the customizable avatar character, the actual gameplay experience leaves much to be desired and little faith in Sonic Team's ability to deliver a successful title moving forward. Viewers who have seen my Sonic Mania review will already know how my review system works. I grade on a 3-tier system. The first tier is how well the title adheres to the essential elements of Sonic from a gameplay perspective. If you aren't familiar with these elements, I encourage you to go to my video essay by the same name and come back to this review afterwards. The second tier is presentation. How does the game look and sound? Is it overall aesthetically pleasing, and is the story told well? And finally, cohesion. How well do all of these isolated aspects work together as a whole? Is the game more than the sum of its parts, or is it a disjointed mess? With that groundwork out of the way, let's dig into Sonic Forces. Forces is a return to the boost formula, as seen in Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, and Sonic Generations. It's a return of a critically appreciated gameplay style asked for by fans after the mixed reception of 2013 Sonic Lost World. However, while the formula is back, the execution is sorely lacking compared to its predecessors. Force's gameplay mechanics are a huge step backwards compared to those of Generations, a game that was far from perfect, but had done well to display the potential that the boost formula holds with standout levels and tightened gameplay from that seen in Unleashed and Colors. If a comparison were to be made between Forces and its closest analog, the clear answer is Colors. But even when compared to Colors, Forces comes up inferior in almost every way, starting with how the game controls. Modern Sonic is more automated in Forces than he has ever been. Huge swaths of his levels take control out of the hands of the player, requiring no controller input whatsoever for the sake of spectacle. Even when the player is in control, the gameplay is almost entirely on rails. Gone is the drift mechanic entirely, as the entire game auto-points Sonic in the correct direction at all times, making any twists and turns in the path purely aesthetic. When Sonic is up to speed, the only reason to touch the analog stick at all is to strafe from left to right to avoid occasional obstacles. But with how narrow and linear Forces is compared to previous boost titles, there is little even of this interaction that's required, as the quick step almost entirely removes the need for any manual movement whatsoever. When the levels do decide to open up, little skill is necessary in order to progress. Long rows of boost pads ensure that Sonic never slows down, and masks the unrefined momentum and physics system of Forces that has been significantly downgraded from its predecessors. This design decision was entirely intentional, as stated in an interview by Sonic producer Takashi Iizuka, who took pride in the degree of automation included in Forces, added in order to keep Sonic constantly moving forward at a fast clip, so players don't have to deal with the frustration of actually having to utilize skill to accomplish the game's objectives. This does change slightly along with the camera perspective, however. As with other previous boost games, players will spend the majority of their time in the 2D perspective. Sonic's physics shift slightly during these times, making him more agreeable to how the level design functions without a Z-axis. Specifically towards the end of the game, the level design does begin to open up and utilize less automation, specifically with Stage 26 Mortar Canyon. Its constant downward slopes allows for a lot of fun to be had with the boost jumps as well as with well-timed stomps. Unfortunately, the potential of this type of level design seen in Mortar Canyon is never capitalized on. Modern Sonic's gameplay peaks here and never approaches its quality again. The Avatar character, however, fares a little bit better. Players who come for the potential of seeing their own custom character fighting alongside Sonic and his pals have a lot to look forward to in Forces. The degree of personalization one can add to their character will certainly offer hours of enjoyment to those invested in the mechanic. From a gameplay point of view, the Avatar also shows a bit more potential than modern Sonic. The Avatar's acceleration and top speed are significantly slower than that of Sonic, feeling closer to something like Adventure's rate of speed, allowing a higher degree of interaction without intruding automation. However, where the Avatar stages are let down are in the level design. Despite a few instances of interesting concepts, most portions lack refinement. an accusation that could be leveled at pretty much the rest of the game. The main form of attack with the Avatar characters are Wispons, wisp-powered weapons that have a wide breadth of uses. Wispons have a large attack range, allowing multiple enemies to be dispatched at once. This, however, has resulted in Sonic Team being extremely lackadaisical with enemy placement and level conveyance. There is no indication of when the player is going to run directly headlong into a group of enemies until it's too late to react. This essentially requires the player to spam their Wispon constantly to ensure that they don't run into an unannounced egg pawn. This also means that there's really no reason to switch from the default flamethrower Wispon you get at the beginning of the game, as its unlimited constant stream is the most efficient way of dispatching enemies, and the secondary burst function is the most effective means of secondary traversal. But similar to modern Sonic, these design decisions result in a gameplay highly devoid of any skill. A player can simply spam their way through. A lot of shortfalls of both the modern Sonic and Avatar character are somewhat diluted in the unique tag team mode, where both modern Sonic and the Avatar team up and combine mechanics. Sonic's speed mixes with the Avatar's agility. This is far from enough to rectify a force's myriad of problems, but nonetheless, the tag team functionality showcases a lot of potential and ends up being some of the most fun portions of the entire game. Unfortunately, this gameplay style only takes up a modicum of the game's overall playtime, probably only a grand total of 10 minutes of Force's measly 4-hour runtime if you're being generous. And that's all for the gameplay Oh right, I'm forgetting something, aren't I? Classic Sonic is also a thing. Though due to the afterthought nature of his inclusion, it's clear that he was only added due to his marketability, as his involvement in the plot is entirely worthless, and his amount of stages make it clear that his implementation was not a high priority. The most clear message that Classic Sonic's involvement in Forces brings across is that he's in better hands with the Mania team than with Sonic Team. While he functions similarly to the way that he did in Generations, he feels significantly heavier this time around, and his physics are extremely half-baked. Rolling doesn't function as it ought to, as using it will actually slow Sonic down rather than increase his overall speed. And the drop dash, fresh from Mania, is effectively worthless both due to its clunky implementation as well as with level design that doesn't complement its functionality. Classic stages don't have the same degree of automation as modern Sonic and the Avatar, but the automation that is there exists because Classic Sonic's mechanics and physics are too half-baked to allow Classic to traverse his levels without it, really driving home the point that Sonic Team at this point really has no understanding of the gameplay philosophy Classic Sonic fans expect, or the technical proficiency required to portray it accurately. Hopefully this is the last time we see Classic Sonic used as a marketing crutch in a Sonic Team project, and that he's left to the Mania team who can properly create a Classic Sonic experience. While the gameplay side of Forces is pretty much a wash, there's no denying that from a presentational perspective, there are some definite highlights to the game. Graphically, the game has moments of particular beauty, at times being the most visually impressive Sonic game to date. Particle and lighting effects have never looked better in a Sonic game, making the world a fun one to experience visually, if not from a gameplay perspective. Two major visual highlights in the game are modern Sonic's Egg Gate and the Avatar's capital city, and showcase some of the best that Forces has to offer. Yet on the flip side of the coin, there are also some extremely ugly textures that crop up here and there, specifically towards the end of the game, in the cutscene including the final stand. It feels almost like a Dreamcast-era work from time to time. Along with this, the quality of cutscenes and in-game animations varies wildly from moment to moment. Eggman specifically has never looked better in-game, but nearly all of the hero characters are only slightly better animated than earlier titles, though cutscene animation would be more forgivable were there anything compelling about the plot to make up for it. Unfortunately, however, that is not the case. Many fans were excited to hear that Forces was going to attempt a darker plot, akin to those seen in the Adventure era once more. Unfortunately, however, that plot comes via Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations writers, who unfortunately seem to not quite have the dramatic chops to pull off the tone that the game attempts to go for. This becomes all the more clear when looking at the short but still far more impressive Sonic Forces prequel comics, written by the head writer of the Archie Sonic series and new head writer for the Sonic IDW series, Ian Flynn. Why he wasn't utilized for the actual writing of the game is a mystery, but after the droll delivery of a plot that had real potential in the game itself, I can only hope that Ian Flynn is handed the reins of a future Sonic title. It's clear at this point that Sonic Forces was an exercise by Sonic Team to attempt to streamline the boost formula as far as possible, to make it easier and faster to develop for a quick profit. Everything about the game reeks of being rushed, and the elements that had the most potential were barely explored, much less capitalized on. It's baffling to see how little a supposedly 4-year development cycle has brought forth. It seems pretty likely at this point that the game ran into developmental issues that required a consolidation and massive reduction of features in order to have a product to release. It's a shame that this is all that Sonic Team has to show for it. Forces is not without some merit, and there is fun to be had here and there. Depending on what the player comes to Sonic Forces to experience, they may come away enjoying the game. Those who love the idea of having a custom avatar to play as will certainly be satisfied with the depth of customization options, as well as with the inherent appeal of seeing their OC fight alongside Sonic characters. Those who come to the game for the series' return to a darker plot may have a mileage that varies, depending on what qualities of the plot they are looking for. However, those coming looking for a good gameplay experience capitalizing on the strides forward established by Generations will likely walk away very disappointed. Sonic Forces is a polarizing game that will likely result in extremely significant changes to the series in the future. While no one can say for sure what those changes may actually look like, Forces' impact on the series will likely be felt for years to come, even if the game itself quickly is forgotten as a failed attempt to maximize profit with a minimal amount of effort. But for now, that's all I've got. Have a good one.
Swear fealty to Quack Quack, and we shall smile favorably upon you.